Russian President Vladimir Putin's image has taken a beating following the aborted mutiny by the Wagner Group, which exposed riots in the Russian Defense Ministry. With Prigozhin's group now retreating following Belarus president's intervention, it remains to be seen if his conditions are met and action taken against Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu. Prigozhin's mutiny laid bare Putin's vulnerability, exposing divisions in Russia's military and loyalty to him in the midst of the war in Ukraine. Had Prigozhin sustained his rebellion against Moscow's forces, Kremlin would likely have been forced to pull out its troops from the Ukrainian front lines. As a threat to Putin's men became clear after Wagner's men took control of the southern city of Rostov-on-don, reaching Moscow's doors just 500 kilometers away in Voronezh, while forging ahead to Lipetsk, 460 kilometers away. While a Russian fighter plane had been shot down and fuel depots were set on fire, Prigozhin challenged Russia's top military brass for lying to the Russian president and people. Now, according to reports, U.S. spy agencies picked up the signs days ago that Prigozhin was planning to rebel in mid-June. This is after a June 10th Russian Defense Ministry order that all volunteer detachments would have to sign contracts with the government. This meant a takeover of Prigozhin's mercenary troops, who helped Russia secure some of its most notable tactical victories, especially in Bakhmut. Prigozhin had publicly protested the Defense Ministry's order, with speculation rife that he might move against Russian positions. In a last-moment deal, as the Wagner chief got closer to Moscow, he announced a stunning retreat. He claimed he did not want to spill any more Russian blood after striking an amnesty deal brokered by Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko. Now, according to reports, the deal called for dropping of criminal charges against Prigozhin after he accused Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu of ordering an attack on his mercenaries, while demanding an end to the defense minister's leadership. Normalcy is being restored in Russian cities of Rostov-on-don, Voronezh and Lipetsk as Wagner mercenaries retreat to their earlier held positions. Kremlin claims that the Wagner leader will be given safe passage to Belarus, while troops involved in the mutiny will be given immunity from prosecution and others permitted to sign formal contracts with the Russian Defense Ministry. Pressure is mounting on Vladimir Putin to keep his side of the bargain. It remains to be seen if he will tighten his grip following the mutiny and whether or not he will replace Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu after a decade. U.S. Secretary of State has reacted to developments in Moscow. Blinken says the short-lived rebellion from Wagner mercenaries reveals real cracks in Putin's authority and also poses a direct challenge to Putin's authority. Let's now bring in Edward P. Joseph, who is a senior fellow and lecturer at Johns Hopkins University and a foreign policy analyst from California. Edward, good to see you and welcome to the program. There are reports that the U.S. spy agencies picked up the signs days ago that Prigozhin was indeed planning to rebel in mid-June. With that information in mind, could this been have averted in the first place? Excuse me for that.
Good to be with you, and it's a very good question. It's not clear entirely whether it could have been avoided. It appears that from Prigozhin's statements that he was trying to preempt some kind of an attempt to rein him in from Russian military. So this is Prigozhin's basis, his claim for launching this, what is effectively a mutiny. Of course, the rapid turnaround here does raise questions, but the fact that your piece mentioned the reaction from Secretary of State Blinken, and the fact, here's really the takeaway here, that how Russia looks so weak and how Putin looks so weak here. The fact that you have this open challenge to Putin's authority, and here's what's also so important, is Prigozhin's claim that the entire war was based on false premises. this is what takes this out of, it makes it more difficult that this was some kind of elaborate charade between Putin and Prigozhin to move him into Belarus. There is serious weakness, exposure of Russian weakness, exposure of Putin's weakness from these developments, even if there is some bizarre relationship here, or but the fact that Prigozhin claimed that the entire premises for the war was false, in other words, that there was no threat from Ukraine to Russia or Russian interests, he stated that very clearly. He claimed that this was a war based on the ambitions from Sergei Shoigu, the defense minister, who's very close to Vladimir Putin.
Right.
So, and plus we saw those developments on the ground where there appeared to be even some defections to Wagner. So this is exposing Russian weakness, Russian chaos, and the apparent weakness of Vladimir Putin himself. Please.
Edward, let's talk about the statement made by Blinken. Now, the Secretary of State, Blinken, says that the short-lived rebellion from Wagner mercenaries reveals real cracks in Putin's authority. What do you make of that statement from the U.S. Government, so to speak?
Quite significant. Quite significant that Secretary of State Blinken would make these remarks. You know, during the period of these dramatic developments and reports that were actually, you know, it didn't just come out of the blue. As your report indicated, there were statements and there was speculation, already reaction, that Prigozhin's comments were beyond anything that had been seen before in Russia from such a figure. And the U.S. stayed completely quiet. Nothing from President Biden, nothing from Secretary of State Blinken during these events. And there's concern, or there's been residual concern, of course, in the U.S. all along, that if there's some kind of instability within Russia itself, that there would be fear about always, of course, the control of nuclear weapons, that's part of it. But we see here, there's much less concern. And let me quickly add here, for Prime Minister Modi, for India, for India's national security, now is the time to get off the fence. And Prime Minister Modi just had this very successful summit, welcomed into the White House, state dinner, highest honor in the United States. Now is the time to get off the fence. Why sit there? Why be ambivalent? Put India's interests at risk by supporting this very weakened dictator in Moscow, Vladimir Putin. Why do that? Why put India's interests at risk? Now is the time, not just for Prime Minister Modi, but around the world, those who have been ambivalent, to see how this massive miscalculation of Vladimir Putin to launch this war and the weakness and exposure of this chaos of a mafia-style system in Russia. This is no friend, nothing to be relied on for Indian interests or interests of any other country. Please.
Edward, what are the possible ramifications of this aborted rebellion to the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine in the long run? And in your own view, what do you think President Putin is likely to do next?
Okay, great questions. Let's take them one at a time. In terms of the impact on the war, remember the timing. This comes as Ukraine is launching this counteroffensive. Look, morale is a huge component of military success. That all military strategists know that. Sometimes some consider morale to be among the highest components. And so this boosts Ukrainian morale at a critical moment, and it does the opposite for Russian morale on the troops, this on the ground, for their morale. What can you say? Even not just ordinary soldiers, but the leaders. How could you mobilize your forces, lead them into battle, put them at risk, put yourself at risk when there's this chaotic confusion back in Moscow that at the very least shows the lack of competence of your leaders, something they should already be aware of. So it has a immediate impact on morale. And what else does it do? It provides the United States and its European Union and NATO allies and others around the world, including important allies like South Korea and Japan, who are strong supporters of the Western effort here, of this U.S.-led effort to support Ukraine. It gives them the confidence that, guess what? Ukraine could actually win, that Ukraine could actually do what people didn't believe was possible. So that gives greater incentive for the US-led coalition, NATO-led coalition, and EU partners to provide Ukraine with everything that it needs to succeed in this counteroffensive. And even that will itself provide additional reason for Moscow and those in Moscow to consider where they are going to put their loyalty now. That's what's an open question here. When you have this kind of a threat, right, Prigozhin all of a sudden looks like an alternative there to Vladimir Putin. Please.
I've been talking to a senior fellow and lecturer at the Johns Hopkins University and a foreign policy analyst from California, Edward P. Joseph. Thank you very much for talking to WION Wild is One today.
You're welcome.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.